June 6th, 1944. D-Day, they called it. To us, it was just survival. I was barely older than you, maybe 19, when I stepped off that landing craft. The roar of the engines, the crashing waves, and above all, the deafening sound of gunfire. It was chaos. You could feel the fear in the air, thick as the smoke from the bombs. But let me tell you, it wasn't about being brave. It was about doing what had to be done. I didn't feel like a hero, not for a second. I just prayed my boots would hit the sand and not the water. We knew what was waiting for us up that beach, and we went anyway. Let me tell you the story of that day, not from the books, but from my own two eyes. Omaha Beach. It's on the northern coast of France in a region called Normandy. If you look at a map, it's part of the English Channel coastline, stretching about 5 miles long. On June 6, 1944, it wasn't just a beach, it was a battlefield. This stretch of sand and cliffs became the focus of one of the largest and most critical military operations in history, the Allied invasion of Nazi-occupied France. The beach itself is bordered by steep bluffs that seemed like walls to us back then. Those cliffs, they were dotted with enemy bunkers and machine gun nests. The Germans had fortified the area with barbed wire, mines, and obstacles designed to trap and destroy landing crafts. You wouldn't know it now, looking at its peaceful waves and soft sand, but every inch of that ground was a challenge for us to claim. Omaha was just one of 5 beaches assigned for the invasion. Others like Utah, Gold, Juneau, and Sword had their own challenges, but Omaha was the toughest. The beach's position, flanked by high terrain, gave the enemy an advantage. From those heights, they could see everything, and we felt like sitting ducks coming ashore. Now, you might be wondering, what was the objective at Omaha Beach? Well, let me tell you, it wasn't just about taking the beach. That was only the first step. Our real mission was to break through the German defenses and get inland. See, Omaha Beach was like a doorway. If we could push through, we could start freeing France from Nazi control and eventually all of Europe. But let me tell you, that doorway was locked up tight, and the Germans weren't about to hand over the key. The first objective, plain and simple, was survival. The Germans had turned that beach into a killing zone. Machine guns raked the sand, artillery pounded the shoreline, and there wasn't much to hide behind except for the obstacles they'd planted to stop our landing crafts. We had to get off that beach as fast as we could. Every second we spent in the open was a second closer to death. It wasn't just fear driving us, it was instinct. If we wanted to stay alive, we had to move. Once we made it off the beach, and believe me, that was no small feat, we had to deal with the cliffs. Those bluffs weren't just steep. They were crawling with enemy bunkers and machine gun nests. The Germans had the high ground, and they could see everything we were doing. Climbing up those cliffs felt like running straight into the jaws of hell. But we didn't have a choice. If we didn't take out those defenses, the beach would stay a death trap, and the reinforcements wouldn't stand a chance. Our engineers had their own job to do, and boy, was it dangerous. They had to clear the beach of mines and obstacles while under constant fire. Imagine trying to defuse a bomb while someone's shooting at you. That's what they were dealing with. Without them, we couldn't bring in tanks, artillery, or supplies, and without those, we couldn't win. They were the unsung heroes of the day, working with steady hands in the middle of chaos. And then there was the inland objective. See, the beach wasn't the end game, it was the starting line. Once we took the high ground, our job was to push further into France and link up with the other Allied forces landing at the nearby beaches. Together, we'd form a solid front that the Germans couldn't break. But that meant taking villages, securing roads, and holding off counterattacks. Every step forward was a battle, but every step mattered. Believe me, it wasn't just a handful of us out there. It was a massive team effort. The Allies had planned this invasion for months, and Omaha Beach was just one piece of the puzzle. But let's focus on our part of it. At Omaha, it was mostly American troops taking the lead, with thousands of brave men from the U.S. Army stepping onto that sand. Most of us were just kids, 18, 19 years old. But we had a job to do, and we were determined to do it. The main force landing at Omaha was the 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions. You might have heard of the 1st Infantry Division before, the Big Red One, they called them, because of the red number 1 on their patches. They were veterans, battle-hardened from fighting in North Africa and Sicily. These guys knew war. The 29th Infantry Division, though, they were newer to the fight, mostly citizen soldiers from places like Virginia and Maryland. They hadn't seen much combat before, but let me tell you, they fought like hell that day. When the chips were down, it didn't matter if you were a rookie or a veteran. We were all in it together. We weren't alone either. The Navy played a huge role, getting us to the beach in those landing crafts. If you've ever seen pictures of those flat-bottom boats with the ramp in the front, you know what I'm talking about. The sailors piloting those things had nerves of steel, bringing us in as close as they could, even under heavy fire. And the ships offshore, they were pounding the German defenses with everything they had. Shells as big as tree trunks flying overhead. But the truth is, the bombardment didn't take out as many enemy positions as we'd hoped, so a lot of that fight fell on us infantrymen. The engineers were another critical part of the team. They came ashore with us, carrying heavy equipment to clear mines, blow up obstacles, and open paths for reinforcements. These guys were some of the bravest I've ever seen, doing their job with bullets flying all around them. Without them, the tanks and supplies would have never made it off the beach. And speaking of tanks, we had special amphibious tanks called DD tanks. They were designed to float and swim to shore. The idea was to give us some armored support right from the start. But the waves were rough that day, and many of those tanks sank before they even got close. Still, the crews who made it ashore fought with everything they had, giving us much-needed firepower to push forward. Overhead, we had the Air Force flying bombing runs to soften up the defenses and provide support. But with all the smoke, chaos, and anti-aircraft fire, it wasn't an easy task for them either. They did their best, and every little bit helped. Even the medics deserve a mention. They were out there risking their lives to save others. You'd see them darting across the sand, dragging wounded men to safety, sometimes getting hit themselves in the process. Those guys had hearts as big as the ocean. Let's not forget the leadership either. Generals like Omar Bradley were back on the ships, overseeing the whole operation, making tough decisions and coordinating the attack. On the ground, it was up to the officers and NCOs to rally the troops, keep us moving, and adapt when plans fell apart, which they often did. The Germans, of course, were the other force involved. They weren't about to give up that beach without a fight. They were well-trained, well-armed, and dug into strong defensive positions. They had the advantage of the high ground and years to prepare, but they weren't expecting the sheer determination we brought with us. All right, now that you know who was there, let's talk about the challenges we faced and the plans we had to secure Omaha Beach. Because, let me tell you, nothing about that day was easy. Every inch of that beach was a fight, and the plans we had, well, some worked and some didn't, but we had to adapt, or we wouldn't have made it. The first big challenge was the German defenses. The Nazis had been preparing for years, turning Omaha Beach into a fortress. They called it part of their Atlantic Wall, and boy, was it a wall. They had bunkers, trenches, and machine gun nests dug into the bluffs overlooking the beach. From up there, they could see everything we did. Their artillery was zeroed in on the sand, and they had snipers picking us off one by one. And then there were the obstacles: wooden stakes, steel hedgehogs, barbed wire, and mines, everything designed to stop us in our tracks. It was like walking into a giant mousetrap, and we were the mice. On top of that, the weather threw us a curveball. The seas were rough that morning, and a lot of our landing craft struggled to get to shore. Some of them sank, and we lost men and equipment before we even touched the beach. Those who made it had to wade through freezing water, weighed down by wet gear while under constant fire. I'll never forget the sound, the roar of the waves mixed with the crack of gunfire and the explosions all around us. It was chaos, and let's not forget the terrain. Omaha Beach wasn't just a flat stretch of sand. It was wide, about 200 yards from the waterline to the base of the bluffs. And there was no cover, no trees, no rocks, nothing but open ground. When we hit the sand, we were like sitting ducks. And then, once we got off the beach, we had to scale those cliffs. It felt like the world's toughest obstacle course, only the stakes were life and death. So, what was the plan? Well, the idea was to hit the beach in waves. The first wave would clear a path through the obstacles and secure a foothold. Then the second and third waves would bring in reinforcements, tanks, and equipment to push inland. We had naval bombardments and airstrikes lined up to soften the defenses before we landed, and paratroopers dropped behind enemy lines to cut off German reinforcements. On paper, it was a solid plan. But as they say, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. The naval and air bombardments, for example, didn't do as much damage as we'd hoped. Many of the German bunkers were still intact when we landed, and the enemy was ready and waiting for us. The paratroopers, they were scattered all over the place because of the bad weather, so they couldn't link up and hit their targets as planned. And those amphibious tanks we were counting on, most of them sank in the rough seas before they even made it to the beach. When things started going wrong, we had to think on our feet. The engineers did everything they could to clear paths through the obstacles, even under heavy fire. Infantry squads split up and found their own ways up the cliffs using ropes, ladders, or just sheer grit. Leaders on the ground, sergeants, lieutenants, captains, stepped up and rallied their men, even when communication with higher command broke down. It was messy, but we kept pushing forward because stopping wasn't an option. One of the most important parts of the plan that worked was teamwork. We didn't fight as individuals. We fought as a unit. If one guy was pinned down, another would lay down covering fire. If someone got hit, a medic or a buddy would drag him to safety. Everyone had each other's backs, and that made all the difference. After all the chaos, the bloodshed, and the heartbreak of that day, we achieved what we set out to do. But it didn't come easy. Nothing about it did. By the end of June 6, 1944, we had a foothold on Omaha Beach, and that foothold changed the course of the war. Let's start with the immediate outcome. By nightfall, we'd pushed through the German defenses and secured the high ground above the beach. That wasn't just a victory, it was a miracle, considering how everything seemed stacked against us. The Germans fought tooth and nail to hold on to their positions, but they couldn't match the sheer determination of the Allied forces. We took those cliffs, bunker by bunker, trench by trench. It wasn't clean, and it wasn't quick, but we did it. And once we had control of the bluffs, the beach was ours. Now, that might not sound like much at first, just one beach out of 5, right? But Omaha Beach was the toughest nut to crack, and cracking it was a turning point. You see, the Germans had thought their defenses there were impenetrable. By taking Omaha, we showed them, and the rest of the world, that the Allies weren't going to back down. It gave us a staging ground to bring in more troops, equipment, and supplies. From there, we could start the push inland, linking up with the forces at Utah Beach to the west and Gold Beach to the east. Together, we began to form a solid front across Normandy. The cost of that victory, though, it was staggering. Over 2,400 Americans were killed, wounded, or missing by the end of the day. Think about that for a moment. Each one of those numbers was a son, a brother, a friend. Some never even made it off the landing craft. Others fell on the beach or in the first steps inland. Those of us who survived, we carried their memories with us every step of the way. They were the real heroes, and we owed it to them to finish the job. The long-term outcome of Omaha Beach was even bigger than we could have imagined at the time. It marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. By securing Omaha, we opened the door for the Allied advance into France. Within weeks, we'd liberated key towns like Saint-Lô and Carentan. By the end of August, Paris was free, and within a year, the war in Europe was over. But it all started with that foothold on the Normandy beaches. Omaha Beach also taught us a lot about resilience, teamwork, and adapting in the face of overwhelming odds. No matter how bad things got, we kept going. We trusted each other, leaned on each other, and never gave up. That's what made the difference, not just at Omaha, but throughout the war. It's a lesson I hope you carry with you too. Whatever challenges you face, remember that you're stronger than you think, especially when you work together with others. Today, Omaha Beach stands as a symbol of sacrifice and courage. If you visit it now, you'll see memorials and cemeteries honoring those who fought and died there. The sand that was once stained with blood is now peaceful, and the bunkers that once rained fire are silent. But the echoes of what happened there still linger. They remind us of what was at stake and what it took to secure the freedom we enjoy today. So when you hear the name Omaha Beach, remember, it's more than just a place on a map. It's a story of bravery, sacrifice, and determination. It's proof that even when the odds seem impossible, with courage and unity, we can achieve something extraordinary. And that's a lesson worth holding on to, no matter what battles you face in your own life.